Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we're tackling a massive leap forward in the world of content management. If you work with Adobe Experience Manager or AEM as a cloud service, you already know that managing content for a dozen different channels can honestly feel a bit like a high-wire act. Well, today, we're demystifying a feature that completely changes the game. We are talking about visual content fragments. We're going to see exactly how AEM is taking the raw kind of invisible power of headless data and finally giving it a face. Get ready, because we're about to bridge the gap between developer architecture and authoring intuition.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll unpack the headless content dilemma. Then we'll meet visual content fragments. See how data is bridged using handlebars. Explore an incredible AI workflow from Figma to Fragment. And finally, wrap up with the omni-channel publishing and SEO superpowers this all unlocks. All right, section 1, the headless content dilemma and the missing link. To really understand why this new evolution is so brilliant, we first have to look at the tension created by modern, purely headless architecture. We've spent the last few years decoupling our front ends from our back ends. And hey, that's great for delivery, but it's created a bit of a crisis for the people actually creating the content. This comparison right here perfectly illustrates the core divide we've historically faced in AEM. Over on the left, we've got your traditional content fragments. These are pure JSON data. They're entirely headless, completely presentation agnostic, and they basically act as a structural skeleton. Then, on the right, we have experience fragments. These are fully designed HTML, what we might call headful. They contain the visual flesh, the layout, the CSS, the whole shebang. Historically, you kind of had to choose. Do you want the structural purity of the JSON skeleton, or do you want the visual certainty of the HTML flesh? But here's the thing. If you chose pure headless, you immediately ran into some pretty severe blind spots. Just think about this from the perspective of a content author for a second. You're typing this beautiful, highly curated promotional campaign into a form, but all it spits out is JSON data. It literally cannot be visually previewed. You're effectively flying blind. You're essentially doing the classic publish and pray method, making it incredibly difficult to predict how that content will actually render across different channels. And on the technical side, standard headless publishing often just embeds a reference to the content fragment into the page rather than the actual content itself. That essentially hides your valuable content from search engines and automated AI agents. Not ideal, right? So that tension between data purity and authoring visibility was a massive pain point. But that brings us to section 2, meet visual content fragments. This is the elegant solution that finally brings the best of both worlds together. By definition, a visual content fragment is an AEM content fragment that takes the layout and design of an attached HTML template and uses it to render structured content directly into visual experiences. It actually empowers authors to preview their structured data in its final, formatted form well before they ever hit the publish button. You still get all the headless, omni-channel benefits of the structured data, but with the immediate visual feedback of a traditional web page. It really is the perfect hybrid. Now, you might be wondering, okay, great, but do I have to wait around for a web developer to build a custom HTML template before I can even see anything? Actually, no way. AEM provides a built-in generic template right out of the box. This gives you immediate table-style formatting for rapid content QA. So the absolute second an author populates those key/value pairs in the fragment, they can just use this default template to visually validate that all their data is correct without having to write a single line of custom code. So how exactly does the raw and visible JSON physically transform into a beautiful visual layout? Let's roll up our sleeves for section 3, bridging data with handlebars and visual mapping. We're going to take a quick technical deep dive into the mechanics here. Notice the really clean, methodical 4-step journey we have mapped out here. Step 1, you define your content fragment model fields, so things like your headline, description, and image. Step 2 is where the magic actually happens. Developers map those specific fields to HTML tags using handlebar syntax. If you haven't used it, handlebars is just a simple, logicless templating language that acts as our dynamic bridge. Step 3, you attach this handlebars template to the model inside AEM. And finally, step 4, AEM renders the visual output. The data travels seamlessly from a backend form field right into a fully styled HTML element. All right, moving right along to section 4, Figma to fragment automation, focusing on AI prompts. Because let's be real, writing HTML templates with handlebars is incredibly powerful, but it's still a highly technical process. What if we could just automate that entire design to development pipeline? Well, thanks to the new Experience Production Agent in AEM, we absolutely can. Take a look at this prompt. It really is this simple.
Using agentic AI capabilities, a user can just type import from Figma, drop in their Figma share URL, and say to AEM. That single, simple prompt initiates this incredibly complex background import process that literally bridges the gap between your design team and your content management system in seconds. This automation translates abstract AI capabilities into concrete, massive operational time savings. It literally recreates the Figma designs directly inside AEM as a cloud service. And even more importantly for our topic today, it automatically generates the necessary HTML templates for your visual content fragments. This completely bypasses the need for manual, highly technical hand-coded templates set up by your web developers. You design it visually, the AI translates it, and your authors can immediately start using it to preview their headless content. It is a total game changer. Now, as amazing as the authoring and preview benefits are, the true superpower reveals itself in Section 5, Publishing and SEO Superpowers, and Omni-Channel Delivery. So, the absolute crucial point you should take away is this. Visual content fragments give you the semantic HTML advantage. Think about it. Previously, when you published a fragment to Edge delivery services, you were really only embedding a reference. The actual page just had a pointer to the data. You had to manage complex GraphQL endpoints and create completely separate blocks just to fetch the data. Now, AEM publishes the fragment as self-contained semantic HTML directly to the Edge. The content is actually there in the source code. This eliminates a massive amount of architectural overhead. And incredibly importantly, because the full text is present in the HTML right from the start without requiring JavaScript to fetch it, it dramatically improves ingestion by large language models and completely supercharges your SEO optimization. Let's compare embedding techniques for a second so we can see how to safely embed this HTML into other web pages. If you just inline it using a basic fetch and inner HTML, sure, it's simple, but you run a really high risk of CSS collisions. And we all know that troubleshooting CSS cascade issues where a fragment accidentally overwrites the host page's styling is pretty much a developer's worst nightmare. So to solve this, AEM natively uses the custom element and shadow DOM technique. By wrapping the content in a custom CF visualization tag, it encapsulates the markup and provides true shadow DOM isolation. This guarantees that your visual content fragment is going to look exactly as intended, completely insulated from the CSS cascade of whatever host page it lives on. It is brilliant, collision-free omni-channel delivery. Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. I'd love for you to look at your current architecture and honestly ask yourself, if your headless content cannot be seen by modern LLM agents, and if it can't even be visually previewed by your own authors, is it truly ready for the omni-channel future? Visual content fragments in AEM solve both the authoring blind spot and the SEO blind spot in one fell swoop. Seriously, don't let your content stay invisible. Thanks so much for learning with me today.